Lisa Harper, a renowned cardiothoracic surgeon with a spotless record, sat frozen at the edge of the conference table. Across from her sat Dr. Robert Stein, the hospital's chief of surgery, his expression grim. The harsh fluorescent lights reflected off his balding head as he shifted papers across the desk toward her. "Dr. Harper, I'm afraid we have some serious allegations," Stein said, his voice cold and detached. "There are reports of theft from the hospital's pharmacy and medical supplies missing from your operating rooms. Additionally, a malpractice suit has surfaced regarding a patient who recently passed away under your care." Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the papers in front of her, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the accusations. "This must be a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "I've never—" "Lisa," Stein interrupted, using her first name for the first time in years, "the evidence points to you. The hospital has no choice but to suspend you pending further investigation." Her world crumbled. Every hour she had spent perfecting her craft, the sleepless nights, the countless lives she had saved, all thrown into jeopardy. The accusation felt like a betrayal from her own life's work. "Dr. Stein, I would never compromise my patients. I've dedicated my life to this hospital. Please, let me see the evidence." Stein shook his head. "You'll have to take it up with the board. We've called in an external auditor. Until then, your hospital access has been revoked." That evening, Lisa returned home to find her husband, Jeff, sitting in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey. His blue eyes, once warm, were now distant as he gazed out the window. She had always admired his calm demeanor, but tonight his coolness felt like ice in her veins. She sank into the chair opposite him, her hands trembling as she recounted what had happened at the hospital. "Jeff, they're accusing me of theft and malpractice. Can you believe it?" He listened in silence, not meeting her gaze, until she finished speaking. The seconds dragged on like hours before he finally spoke. "That's serious, Lisa. What are you going to do?" His response stung. There was no comfort, no reassurance in his tone. "I didn't do any of this," she said, almost pleading. "You believe me, don't you?" Jeff shifted uncomfortably, his hand tightening around the glass. "I don't know, Lisa. Things haven't been great between us lately. I mean, you've been distant, always working. And I don't know, maybe there's more to it. Maybe someone else." She blinked, stunned. "Someone else? You think I'm having an affair?" He finally looked at her, his eyes dark with suspicion. "I don't know what to think anymore. All I know is, you're not the same person I married." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. The man she had built a life with, the man she had trusted above all others, was pulling away at the exact moment she needed him most. The next morning, Lisa woke to the cold realization that her access to the hospital was officially blocked. Her email was disabled, her ID card deactivated. She felt like a ghost, severed from the career she had sacrificed so much for. For the first time in years, she wasn't in the sterile, busy halls of St. Mary's, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the shuffle of nurses. She was alone, adrift. Her phone rang. It was Mason, her oldest friend, someone she could always count on. He had been a cop before going into private investigations, and while their lives had taken different paths, he had always been there for her. "I heard what happened," Mason said, his voice tinged with concern. "This isn't right, Lisa. Something smells off. You need to fight this." "I don't even know where to begin," she said softly. "The accusations, they came out of nowhere." "I'll help you," he replied, determination in his voice. "I've still got connections. I'll start digging around, see if we can find out who's really behind this." Days passed, and as Lisa met with her lawyer to prepare for the upcoming hearing, she found herself retreating inward, consumed by the turmoil in her personal life. The accusations were terrifying enough, but Jeff's suspicions and coldness felt like daggers in her chest. She had always known their relationship wasn't perfect. Long hours, stress and distance had taken their toll, but she had never imagined he would turn on her so quickly, so easily. And then came the second shock. A week after her suspension, Lisa stood in her bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test in her hand. Positive. The word glowed back at her, an undeniable reality that added another layer of complication to her already shattered life. She was going to have a baby, Jeff's baby, at the same time everything was falling apart. She sat on the edge of the tub, tears welling in her eyes. How had everything unraveled so quickly? What was supposed to be a joyful discovery felt like a cruel joke. She couldn't even trust her husband, let alone bring a child into this mess. That night, Lisa confronted Jeff about the pregnancy. She thought maybe, just maybe, the news would bridge the growing chasm between them. "Jeff, I'm pregnant. she said quietly as they sat at the dinner table. She watched his face carefully, hoping for some glimmer of the man she once knew. But instead, his eyes narrowed. "Are you sure it's mine?" Lisa's breath caught. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "How could you say that?" "Of course it's yours." Jeff stood up, pacing the kitchen. "Lisa, you've been so distant, always at work, and now these accusations. I don't know who you are anymore." "I'm the same person, Jeff. I've never been unfaithful to you. I'm being framed, and I need you to believe me." But Jeff's mind was made up. His paranoia was taking over, and his distance was growing more and more impenetrable. Lisa realized with a sinking heart that she was losing him, or maybe she had already lost him long ago. As weeks passed, Lisa continued to meet with her lawyer, Jane Matthews, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had seen plenty of false accusations in her time. Jane listened carefully as Lisa detailed the hospital's claims and how Jeff had grown more and more suspicious. "We need to focus on the evidence, Lisa," Jane said, flipping through the paperwork. "If the hospital's claims don't hold up in court, we can get you reinstated. But we need to figure out who's really behind this. Someone wants to ruin your career." Lisa nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. But deep down, the seed of doubt had already been planted. What if Jeff was somehow involved? What if the person framing her was closer than she thought? Mason's investigation began to uncover disturbing truths. There were gaps in the hospital's internal security records, mysterious logins under Lisa's ID when she wasn't even in the building. Mason's voice crackled over the phone as he shared what he had uncovered. "Lisa, I've been going through the security logs from the hospital. Someone's been using your ID to access restricted areas during times when you weren't on duty. There are even withdrawals of medication tied to your credentials." Lisa sat up straight in her chair, her pulse quickening. "But that's impossible. I've been locked out since the day they suspended me. How could someone keep using my ID?" "That's the point," Mason replied. "It looks like someone's framing you. Whoever it is, they've had inside access for months. This goes deeper than just a mistake or a simple accusation. It's deliberate." Her thoughts whirled. Someone had meticulously planned this, knowing it would destroy her career. But why and how? Her mind darted back to Jeff, to his recent behavior, the cold suspicion, the distance, the accusatory remarks. Could he have something to do with it? But even as the thought crossed her mind, Lisa recoiled from it. Jeff wasn't capable of something like this, was he? Then again, the man she had married had been slowly slipping away, replaced by someone she barely recognized. That night, after pacing for hours in their empty living room, Lisa confronted Jeff. The tension in their marriage had reached a boiling point, and she needed answers. "Jeff, we need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway of his study. He glanced up from his laptop, eyes hollow, and nodded. "I know things have been hard between us," Lisa started, her voice shaking slightly. "But I've been thinking, what if someone close to me is involved in this? What if someone's trying to sabotage me?" Jeff set his laptop aside and crossed his arms. "Are you suggesting that I had something to do with it?" Lisa hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't know what to think anymore. You've been so distant, so quick to believe the worst about me. I don't want to believe you could." "Could what?" Jeff's voice rose, frustration evident. "Frame you for theft and malpractice. You really think I'm that kind of person?" "I don't know, Jeff," she snapped, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to believe anymore. You don't trust me, and now I don't know if I can trust you." The air between them thickened with unspoken accusations. Jeff's face hardened as he stood up, walking toward her. "Maybe you should be more concerned about why someone would want to frame you, Lisa. Maybe this has nothing to do with me and everything to do with you." "What does that mean?" she demanded, her heart pounding in her chest. "It means," Jeff said coolly, "that you've made enemies, Lisa. People at the hospital, people who don't like how successful you've become. Maybe they're not as innocent as you think." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. There was something unnerving in the way Jeff spoke, as though he knew more than he was letting on. But before she could press him further, he brushed past her, heading toward the door. "I'm going out for a walk," he muttered, leaving her standing alone, her mind spinning. Lisa felt the walls closing in around her. The mounting stress from the accusations and her failing marriage was becoming unbearable. She reached out to Mason again, desperate for more answers. "I think Jeff's involved somehow," she confessed to Mason over a coffee at a quiet corner cafe. "There's something he's not telling me, and I can't shake the feeling that he knows more than he's letting on." Mason leaned back in his chair, frowning. "I've had my suspicions too. I did some digging into Jeff's connections, and guess what? He's been in contact with the hospital's legal team directly. Not just through his work as an attorney, but on this case specifically. Lisa's eyes widened. Why would he do that? He told me he wasn't involved. Mason gave her a sympathetic look. People lie when they're scared, or when they have something to hide. I think we need to find out exactly what Jeff's been up to. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Lisa hired a private investigator to look into Jeff's movements and his communications with the hospital. Days later, the investigator delivered a shocking report. Jeff had been working behind the scenes, feeding information to the hospital's legal team, and even coordinating with the external auditors who were investigating her case. It was a betrayal beyond anything Lisa could have imagined. The man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with was actively working to destroy her. Her hands trembled as she read the report, bile rising in her throat. Jeff wasn't just unsupportive, he was orchestrating the entire situation, framing her for crimes she hadn't committed. But why? What could he possibly gain from tearing her life apart? That evening, Lisa confronted Jeff for the last time. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension as she stood in the doorway of their bedroom, holding the investigator's report in her hand. "Why, Jeff?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Why are you doing this to me?" Jeff looked up from packing a suitcase, his expression cold. "You were never supposed to find out," he said flatly. "But since you have, I might as well explain." Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as Jeff began to speak, the truth spilling out like poison. He had been involved in a secret deal with the hospital board, hoping to use the malpractice allegations to cover up his own financial misdealings. If Lisa took the fall, no one would look too closely at his involvement in a complex web of fraudulent transactions connected to the hospital's finances. "I never wanted to hurt you," Jeff said, almost mechanically, "but I had no choice. I couldn't let them find out about the money." "You betrayed me," Lisa whispered, her voice shaking. "You let me think I was losing my mind, let me believe I was a criminal." "I had to," Jeff said simply. "I couldn't let you ruin everything." Lisa's world shattered in that moment. Everything she had ever known about the man standing in front of her was a lie. Lisa knew she had to act fast. Armed with the evidence Mason had helped her gather, she prepared to take Jeff and the hospital down. She met with Jane the next morning, presenting her with the full extent of Jeff's betrayal. Jane's eyes narrowed as she read through the documents. "This changes everything. We'll file an emergency motion to dismiss the charges against you, and we'll bring Jeff into the spotlight. His connections are about to work against him." With the case now turning in her favor, Lisa felt a surge of determination. She wasn't just fighting for her career anymore, she was fighting for her life, her reputation, and the future of her unborn child. Meanwhile, Mason was working to unravel the deeper conspiracy at the hospital. His police connections had uncovered a trail leading to one of the hospital administrators, a man named Henry Lawton, who had been quietly working with Jeff to embezzle funds. Henry had also been behind the theft of medical supplies, all part of a larger scheme to cover their track. When Mason confronted Henry with the evidence, the man broke under pressure. He confessed to his involvement in framing Lisa and agreed to testify against Jeff in the hospital in exchange for a lighter sentence. The pieces were finally falling into place. Lisa's innocence was about to be proven, and those responsible for her suffering would face justice. The trial moved quickly after Henry Lawton's confession. With overwhelming evidence against Jeff and the hospital board, Lisa's charges were dropped, and a criminal case was opened against those responsible for the false accusations. Lisa sat in the courtroom, her hands resting on her growing belly, as the judge delivered the final verdict. Jeff had been found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. As the gavel struck, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The man who had tried to destroy her was finally being held accountable. Months later, Lisa stood in front of the hospital, her reinstatement official, her reputation fully restored. The road had been long and painful, but she had survived. With Mason by her side, she had fought not only to clear her name but to reclaim her life. And now, with the birth of her child just weeks away, she was ready to start a new chapter, one free from betrayal and filled with hope for the future. The scars of the past would never fully fade, but Lisa had learned to trust herself again. She had come out of the darkness stronger, with a new understanding of what it meant to fight for truth, for justice, and for the life she deserved. The story of betrayal, lies, and revenge had come to an end, but for Lisa, the story of redemption had just begun. So if you love this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and comment below. Your interaction helps us grow.